Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today, I've got a topic that's related to the video that I put out yesterday. I made the decision to cover this topic a while ago, and I'm glad I did after I got to read all the comments on that other video. Seems like this is a very popular thing for people to have questions about. Amy plays a Titan of Industry and says, I'm going to make a Rhino token and I'm going to put a shield counter on Titan of Industry. Nick says, in response, I'm going to play a murder against your Titan of Industry. Amy then says, well, if you're doing that, I guess I'll put the shield counter on the Rhino token instead. Nick replies, okay, if you're going to put the counter on the Rhino token, then I don't want to play the murder anymore. At this point, the players call for a judge. Is Amy allowed to change her mind about which creature is getting the shield counter? Is Nick allowed to change his mind about whether he's playing the murder? Alright. So I wasn't really surprised to see a lot of people asking about this question in the comments for that video that I mentioned earlier. That's because, as a judge, I'm asked to answer questions like this in a lot of different tournaments that I judge at. Interestingly enough, I think that I get this sort of question a lot more the lower the rules enforcement level is. In other words, at kitchen table and regular rel events, I seem to get questions like this a whole lot more than I do at competitive rel. I think this is probably because players have this idea that competitive rel is super serious and really intense, and so therefore take-backsies aren't really allowed, and so therefore that preempts a lot of people from calling a judge or asking for a take-back in a situation where they might have otherwise. That's kind of a shame because people actually do have the right to take back decisions like this in some cases, which we'll talk about here. First, I'll cover how this would work at competitive rel, and then I'll adapt that answer to something in other types of tournaments. Ready? Let's get started. So the first thing that I wanted to point out here is that whenever I have a question like this, I always am going to look for the first time someone did something or tried to do something that was against the rules. So as we covered in the video before, Amy does not have to say what creature that she's putting the shield counter on until she actually physically puts the shield counter on that creature. And so that means Amy is free to change her mind up to the very last minute about what creature she's going to affect. Therefore, nothing that Amy did here is against the rules. Now let's take a look at Nick. And with him, we've got a little bit of a different situation here. You see, Nick did play a murder, and that was a totally legal thing for him to do. There's absolutely no problem at all with Nick playing a murder from his hand targeting a Titan of Industry. Now, later on, Nick sees some other stuff happening in the game that he doesn't like, and he wants to change his mind about whether he cast as the murder. Is this possible? And, well, there wasn't anything illegal that happened in the game in that time. And so what that would mean is that no player committed an infraction before the point where Nick wanted to take back his play of murder. So with that being the case, I'd have a hard time saying that Nick would be able to do that because there usually isn't any way that's policy supported for us to back up actions that have happened in the game unless a player has committed an infraction. So, for example, if Nick asked Amy a question about how many cards she had in her hand and he used that information that Amy gave him in order to help him decide whether he wanted to cast the murder, and then only after he cast the murder did Amy realize that she actually had a different number of cards in her hand, well, in a situation like that, where Amy gave Nick incorrect information that he was supposed to have access to, well, that would be a different case, and Nick probably would be able to undo his casting of murder in a case like that. Or if we found out through the course of an investigation that Nick played his murder, but he didn't actually have the correct mana in order to be able to do that, well, that would be a game rule violation from him, and again, a possible fix for that would include undoing the casting of murder. However, in the case that was originally presented, there was absolutely nothing that either player did that was against the rules up until the point where Nick tried to take his murder back. And so that means that I would probably rule as a judge that he would have to stick with that play. Notice that this is just what I as a judge would rule. If this sort of thing happens in a game that you're playing, even if you're at competitive rel, if you decide that you're nice, then you can let your opponent take back that play, no problem. You don't have to get a judge involved at all. Now let's take a look at what we would do to handle this same sort of situation if it came up at a less serious sort of a tournament, like a Friday Night Magic. And that means that the judge has a lot more freedom to try out different fixes or adjust the fix based on extenuating circumstances, like if maybe there was a language barrier involved or if one of the players is really new. So if this sort of thing happened in an event like that, then I would say that my default would be to do the exact same fix as what I did in competitive rel. However, with that, I would have to say that there are some things that might cause me to change my mind and be a little bit nicer towards Nick and let him take the murder back. Not a guarantee, but definitely something that I would consider based on the other facts involved in the case. And finally, let's take a look at what would happen in a kitchen table sort of a situation. In other words, if I was just playing with a bunch of my friends in one of our houses, what would I rule in that case? And ironically, I would say that this is probably where I get the most of these sorts of questions. However, I've got to say that I don't really have any jurisdiction here. You see, the magic rules and policy documents are really not meant to support events like these. And so what I always say in events like this is, well, the answer is whatever you can get away with is based on how nice your friends are. And I hope everybody can understand why there isn't an official policy that I'm going to give everybody for cases like this. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.